have a few Pen America members here in the audience today, so I do want to say thank you. I'm not going to point, make you all blush, but thank you for coming out today. And then I will hand it over to Amber, who's going to be a moderator for today's panel.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Yeah, we will be having an awesome panel tonight. So I'll be moderating. So my name is Amber Ogden. I am actually a Detroit resident. I'm also a writer. So this kind of, fit into, my background. So tonight we'll be having a discussion about immigration, injustices going on in the city, and in the surrounding city. And so we have a very esteemed panel. First and foremost, I want to thank Pen America for sponsoring this event. And also want to thank the Detroit Public Library for allowing us to have this space tonight. And I'm actually going to turn it over to the panel and allow for each one of them to introduce themselves.
Okay, I'm Alicia Nails. I teach journalism at Wayne State University, and I direct, they have learning communities on most campuses. They're ways to engage students in a small group experience. Ours is based around journalism majors, and actually 3 members of the Journalism Institute for Media Diversity are here. Hello. And so our students are in leadership at the South End and internships in major newsrooms and corporations around the city.
Hi, my name is Liana Aghajanian. I'm a freelance journalist who has called Detroit home for the last 2 years. I write for a lot of national and international publications, often dealing with the topics of immigration, culture, and social issues.
Bonjour, ani Gitchimanitu, Ishkote, and the indigenous cause, Kijana, Gidonjibo, Meshikin, Dolem. That's the original language here on this land of Detroit, before it was called Detroit. And all I said was my name is Knoxx, and I'm here, and I love you.
Thank you. I'm Christine Sauvé. I lead the Welcoming Michigan project for the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. I am based in Detroit, but we work statewide and especially regionally, and I'll speak a little bit about that tonight.
I'm Hayg Oshagan. I'm an associate professor at the communication department at Wayne State, but what brings me to these sorts of events is that some years ago I founded an organization that brought together the largest ethnic and minority papers in this region. So the largest African American paper, the Michigan Chronicle, the largest Jewish paper, the Jewish News, the largest Arabic paper, the Arab American News, the largest Asian paper, the Michigan Korean Weekly, and the largest Latino paper, the Latino Press. The publishers and I come together, work together, plan together, and try to address issues of minority and ethnic populations' concerns as best we can, leveraging the reach of the papers, which is over 140,000 people, and the leadership of the publishers in their community.
Awesome, thank you. Just a little background on why we came together for this panel tonight. So a recent event happened in the month of January, actually on MLK Day. We had Mr. Garcia, who was a resident of the area for 30 plus years. He was suddenly ripped from his family and deported back to Mexico. And really no explanation. Him and his family have been working very hard to try to make his residency legal. But like I said, he had already been here for 30 plus years, and he was brought here at the age of 10. So we kind of wanted to come together and have a conversation surrounding those events and just kind of transition from there. So we'll just kind of jump in. Before I start asking questions, if there's anything in particular that you all want to discuss or talk about, we can do that. It's just going to be kind of free-flowing. We want to make it very conversational, and then at the end we'll also open it up for Q&A.
I can just add quickly that we just printed a story on the Garcias, and you can look it up. It's an update on where the family is and how they're coping with having the father be in Mexico and his wife and child be here in Detroit. She talks of the, out of the sort of the limelight of the national media, the struggle continues, even if people sort of forget the individuals involved. It's on the DJC website. The DJC is another collaboration in this region between WDET, Michigan Radio, Public Television, and Bridge Magazine, and R5 Papers, which are New Michigan Media. And so it's posted on the DJC, and Michigan Radio actually picked up the story too, so it's on Michigan Radio's website too. So just as if anyone is interested in the update of the particular family, we just printed last week.
So the piece that was written about 8 years ago, ethnic media, their influence on politics and participation. How can we tie that into like what's going on today? I know that was about 8 or so years ago. So how can we compare it to today?
Ethnic media are unlike mainstream media in a couple of different important ways. One is that they are far more trusted by their readers than mainstream media are by their readers. Ethnic media are part of the communities, and so there's a high level of trust. The second is that ethnic media are the voices of their communities. They are activists in their communities. And so from their inception, there's a political angle to ethnic media. The part of what they do is political. And so covering politics and organizing their populations to vote is part of what the ethnic media from the beginning are interested in doing. And so we meet regularly to discuss these issues. And I can say in this past election, the population groups that I deal with, Jewish, Latino, Arab, Asian, African American, we're all not on the Trump side of the coin. They were all supportive of Hillary Clinton, and 60 to 70% of their populations voted for Hillary Clinton. But that leaves 30% or so that didn't. We met with Hillary Clinton's campaign during the year to discuss how the campaign could actually make inroads into the ethnic and minority population. They just never bought the idea that they needed to be invested in that way with the minority populations of the region. The assumption often is that, well, they don't have a choice, they have to vote Democrat. And yet what ended up happening in this election is that people didn't vote for Trump, but they didn't vote for Clinton either. And so turnout was much lower than it should have been. The ethnic media provide a way of organizing populations through their readership. The publishers themselves are leaders in their communities, they're small mayors in their communities, and they can lead a charge. But political organizations have to realize that these are populations that need to be attended to, that they have concerns that need to be explained. I mean, Obama administration deported a lot of people, much more so than the Bush administration. And that needed to be explained, for example. Clinton had to explain what she was going to do when she became president. And it's a growing voting bloc. It's becoming more and more are registering to vote. The population increases are higher in the minority populations. In the future, this is going to make more of an impact in American elections than ever before. And ethnic media are the key to get to these populations. They've always been a key to get to these populations, and politicians have to understand these as a key aspect of their strategy.
This actually makes a good transition in regards to media. So this question's for you, Liana. Being an international reporter, what do you think the responsibility of journalism is to immigrants and immigration, specifically in the city of Detroit?
Sure. So I think that if you take into account the history of immigration in Detroit, that there's a huge responsibility that comes with that. You have populations that have come here both internally and internationally to Detroit for a number of reasons spanning the last century. And so I think the simple way to answer that question that often does not get done is to cover them in complex ways, to cover them in holistic ways, to make sure that they're you cover them as humans, as 3D living things, instead of, you know, only related to, for example, headlines, pinning them under a certain, you know, assigning a certain characteristic to them when they are very diverse populations, even within those groups, and are not monoliths. They're very different from each other often. They have internal stripes, but also, you know, just like any other community. And so I think there's this, you know, issue with mainstream media that tries to pigeonhole communities and present them in certain ways. And I think if we spent more time with these communities, and some of it has to do with the kind of way journalism is. It's fast, you know, so we often don't have the time to spend weeks or months with certain people to cover them holistically. But I think if that's a goal in a newsroom, then your coverage is only going to be that much better, and people are going to be more informed, especially in an age where we don't know what's real and what's not anymore. And, you know, we're at a point where we have never been more able to access more information ever before, and that creates problems as well as positive outcomes.
So for Ms. Nails, how imperative is it to teach diversity in the process of effective you know, as far as being effective journalists, especially with topics such as this?
I'm not sure you can teach it, to tell you the truth. We go through exercises at the beginning of my class where we talk about how everyone has felt like an outsider in some area of their life, and how everybody in the class has things in common and things not in common. How to report on the world around you without looking at just people who are like you, and how when you are reporting on other communities, how to give them agency, give them authority over their own story. However, all that being said, at the end of the term, I will still get stories that violate all of this. There are people who are taking this in and are interested in expanding beyond their own worldview, but it takes effort every single time. It's kind of like eating. You know, every single time I pass by Hayg Oshagan, I have to remind myself not to eat it. It is a day in, day out, and everybody's not willing to put in that effort. And so that is why I said I'm not sure you can teach it, because I have seen people take my class and do very well in my class, and then I have experienced something that they've done a year later. And it's okay not to understand other communities, because there's 1,000 things I don't understand about communities that I'm not a part of. And I mean that by race, gender, culture, age, religion. You know, there's 1,000 communities that I'm not a part of. And what I know is I can't tell them how to be what they are, and I'm clear on that. And I remember that. But I have had people argue with me about how to experience life as an African American, who I don't think are in the position to do that. And that's when I get discouraged. And I think to myself, you're not trying.
Being from the community, a community such as Southwest, I know the Garcia family isn't, you know, the first family that has been affected by deportation. You know, this is something that is kind of, you know, ongoing. But how, I kind of want your perspective. How has that affected your surrounding community?
I feel like when families get separated, it always tears apart pieces of the community. When you break up families like that, you break up more families because a lot of families are together. So it just continues to destroy family systems, and those family systems are important to what helps gives our strong communities. So, you know, even though it's one person, there's numerous people that are also being deported as well. And it's just, I think when those things happen, people get afraid. And we don't want to create cultures of fear. So in the community, it's like there's different grassroots responses, some that are not maybe visible, but they're out there doing response work, doing Migra Watch, watching for things like tech systems. So there's all kinds of little systems being maneuvered. But yeah, when things happen like that, more members of the community get organized, and and hopefully when things like that and fear spreads around like that, especially with sometimes the media kind of amplifies a little bit too much fear in those things sometimes, and it's good to have pieces that that are maybe told through social media or other ways that could help encourage people not to be afraid. Because I think as I learn and work with community, that fear is a big aspect into what goes on when those threats happen in the community. So in Southwest, it's a dynamic thing. It's a dynamic thing. It's like you have different pockets of community, so some people are completely unaware of what's going on. So that's part of our work too. Is as we have independent media makers and working together, is to help share that story and spread that vibe. But yeah, and from this perspective from Southwest, I just seen like that happen, and just it's just devastating. And then when I took our friend Blaze, there was no media or nothing. We're just like, yo man, hit us up when you get over there, and just let us know what's going on. So it's just I feel like as these things happen, our community gets more organized and looks for more solutions for these problems. But that's definitely you have different levels in the neighborhood, different levels of class and responses that are aware of these things like that. And I think just to tell off that again, creating our own media and like shaping our own narratives are important. And that's that has everyone in the community has the power to do that. So just helping everyone learn those tools or skills or frameworks to organize that, like media-based organizing specifically.
Can you talk a little bit about how your music ties into sending out that message, making the community aware of what's going on?
I've learned what I'm doing is I'm not making me music, like not about me, maybe coming through the vessel of me, but it's we music, it's us. So I look at these things like a memory map. So when I'm an ancestor and we're leaving these things here, to have these stories and archives of what we've been doing here, So like maybe it may not, music is a subjective thing, but in this case, like spreading the message is like definitely, it's just another way. I mean, it's like hip hop and stuff, and it's like the news of the ghetto. So it's like that's what was rooted in. But the music, the music helps give flavor and vibe to it. I remember when Ayotzinapa was happening, we dropped a track about it, and we got people to come out rather than using a flyer. So I thought that was interesting, how we use media and music to like pull our community together about Ayotzinapa, the missing and murdered students in Mexico. And I think that to continue to do that is just, it's a design process. So I just hope, people are listening, because there's tons of music out there. So I just hope that, my voice resonates with certain people that want to hear things and to connect, create and connect.
A bit about welcoming cities and the progress, the direction that it's going in, the number of welcoming cities that we have currently.
Thanks. So Welcoming Michigan is a statewide project, and we work with community-based organizations, individuals, and then we also partner with institutions like nonprofits or schools and local governments. So the project you referenced is called Welcoming Cities and Counties. It's actually run by our national partner, Welcoming America, and we work with local governments to encourage them to enroll
And it's not just a declaration. I think often there's a misunderstanding about that. Any community can pass a resolution or declaration saying they want to be welcoming. But this is a specific program where municipalities commit to being in this initiative for the long term, and there's a standard called the Welcoming Certified Standard that cities and counties and townships in Michigan are working towards. So we now in Michigan have 20 communities that signed up, and that's the most of any state in the country, so we're pretty proud of that here. And each community is at a different stage, and they're throughout the state, so geographically and politically they're in different places. So in this area, the city of Detroit is a member. Wayne County just joined, which is actually huge because the most immigrants in the state live in Wayne County, the most population in the state. So any policies and practices that the county changes could have a huge impact in this area. Macomb County is a part of it, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo. Washtenaw County is one of the strongest and most forward-thinking members that we have. So in that program, they can enact a lot of different policies to be more supportive and inclusive for immigrants and refugees. And actually, it's really for all residents. We encourage them to say, if you're gonna look at a program to improve access to city or county services, that should be something that really benefits all residents, not just immigrants or refugees. So Washtenaw County, for example, specifically on the topic of extending services to immigrants, actually even went so far as to fund an immigration attorney to assist immigrants with legal services. And to some of the points that the other panelists have already touched on, so I'm a community organizer, but my coworkers are all immigration attorneys, and they're pretty much inundated in this moment. So the number of detentions and the enforcement climate is just, it's intense right now. So that has a huge effect on families. There's so many mixed status families in our state. So if one member is detained, that has a ripple effect on everyone in the household and in the community. So that's something that is definitely of concern. And I just wanted to also touch on the point of storytelling that some of folks have raised. The other part of our work is really encouraging people to tell different kinds of stories about immigration and what the experiences of immigrants and refugees are like in Michigan. So from ethnic media to DIY media to encouraging local media to come out and cover stories, that can have a huge impact. 2 years ago when the anti-refugee sentiment was really starting off, there were a lot of pieces, for example, in Breitbart media covering local refugee issues. And then it really took local media stepping up to kind of cover more of what was happening and tell the stories of families that have been settled here for years and tell them, explore what life is like for them to really counter some of the images that were coming up in other sources. So I'll stop there so we can have more discussion, but I just wanted to echo some of those comments from the others.
I'm like, oh, you can keep going. Fine. How has the media helped or been a detriment to immigration concerns and issues today? I know you have, students, some of us work with young people, things like that, so how,
I think I'm surprised at how it has not helped. I think, I think it was the Free Press I was looking at, so they've got a print story, but now because of multimedia, they also have video of the family, the high level of emotion, the heaving, the crying, the unfairness of the moment when the family is split up. And I guess I'm thinking that I'm surprised that the media has not made people feel more involved, more outraged. you know, because that is one of the roles of the media, and certainly advocacy media. And I'm, you know, I don't know. It's like it's being reported on as, oh, it's a shame. Look at this is happening. It's very sad. And I don't see enough follow-up. Certainly, I've seen protests and coverage of a few protests, but I just am surprised it doesn't. It hasn't, you know, Me Too'd, you know, the kids with the teenagers against guns and all that. Some moments seem to spark more than others, and I'm surprised this has not.
But I mean, you have to separate the mainstream from the ethnic media. I mean, the question. I agree entirely about the ethnic media, the mainstream media not really covering it, paying too much attention to it, except on these sort of you know, blips that happen. You know, but you know, this is the fourth story in the Latino press on Cindy Garcia. I mean, and Jorge. So I mean, the minority press do cover these issues.
Right,
Their
but what's been the result of that coverage? I totally, obviously, we cover our own stories like that, but I'm surprised that it hasn't resulted in more outrage and action.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the coverage that, I mean, I can speak for the ethnic press, the ethnic papers that I work with, which are the largest ones, and you know, there's a step. You know, so there's the coverage of it, and in the coverage you can tell your story with your own words and with about your own family. You can let people know what's going on. You can talk about the outrage, but to take it to the next step, it's organizing a movement. That's got to happen with community organizers, community activists that are in the trenches, so to speak. You know, with social action. I think, but. Coming back, I think the mainstream media, though, I think does not cover it fairly enough, or often enough, or well enough. Even, you know, our 5 ethnic papers, minority papers, are in a collaboration, as I mentioned, with the mainstream papers, or mainstream media. The Detroit Journalism Cooperative is a 3-year experiment where WDET, which is a mainstream radio station, NPR station, Michigan Radio, which is a mainstream NPR station, Public Television, and Bridge Magazine, which is a mainstream investigative news organization, collaborating with the Latino, Arab, Jewish, Asian, and African American paper to improve coverage, to do the thing that you asked about. That is, how do we bring our stories to that stage, to the stage of a few 100,000 readers or listeners or viewers. The purpose being to improve storytelling, to have better journalism actually done. But it's a problem. I mean, there is an issue of understanding minority communities by the mainstream media, of having reporters go in and cover the stories, having assignment editors send a reporter to cover a minority event, an ethnic media event. It's just, especially in the administrative structure of mainstream media, minorities are lacking. I mean, you might have a minority journalist, but someone has to send that journalist to cover a story that has to do with the deportation. And that doesn't often enough happen.
Or before the moment of deportation.
Or that,
Yeah.
yes.
Right. That was going to be my point. I think the larger issue here is newsroom diversity, and we don't have it. It's not even in a city like Detroit, where the population does not reflect the people who are decision makers in newsrooms. And when you have people who are from the communities that I've mentioned in newsrooms, they bring different perspectives and different ideas and different passions to a newsroom. And so we also have to think about who are the people who are covering the story and what stake they have in it. You know, why won't publishers cover it? Because they just don't care, or their communities are not affected, so they don't see it as a bigger issue. One benefit I have as a freelancer is I get to pick who I want to write about, and when I pitch a story, I'm totally invested in the community that I want to write about, and so I take the time and do all that. But again, that's a luxury a lot of breaking news reporters don't have, and that's a point that has to do with the bigger structure of how mainstream media operates and who are the decision makers in media.
You know, I have to say, I teach students, they graduate and they have entry-level jobs in the media. And if you look at the retention of ethnic reporters or news in the newsrooms, it's very low retention. In other words, you go there and you soon see that there's not a lot of interest in your life, your world, or your word about what's important. And so the people in this room who say, who you've come out tonight because you're interested and you're advocates, it is imperative that you back the reporters up, that you contact these newsrooms. That advocacy role cannot be understated. If a story is good, tweet about it, call up, say thanks for covering that. And if something's happened that wasn't covered, because see, I've been that person in the newsroom, and a lot of my students are, when you're saying something important has happened, but if two people who are on the assignment desk say, oh no, that's not that important, there's nothing the reporter can do about it. But if the phone is ringing and people in the community are saying, you know, be sure and cover this, or thank you for covering this, you know, it takes the whole community to back up that person, because people are not staying in these newsrooms. It's not a fun life when you're trying to talk about how important something is and nobody respects what you're saying.
I just wanted to say, I think that even at the mainstream level, even if it's not the ideal reporting that we'd like to see, we work a lot with people who are sort of unsure or not as connected to news sources in the first place, first of all, and also to the issue of immigration. So if someone in their community hears that a story's in one of the bigger mainstream papers or media sources, it trickles down and they start to pick up on it a little bit more. So we have found that, you know, like when the Free Press is keeping alive the issue of hate crimes and bias incidents, that helps keep it alive for us when we're talking to schools and communities. So we do appreciate that. But I will say there's a couple things, there's some tropes that we often see in media that do a lot of harm to the communities that we work with. And you know, don't think of an elephant, I'm gonna say these things, but you know, I don't want folks to repeat them as often as they are. So statements like, this is a nation of immigrants, for example, that can be incredibly harmful to members of the community. And I think a lot of people think of that as a positive statement, but there's so many community members that, especially in a city like Detroit, their ancestors did not come willingly as immigrants, so they don't think of themselves as part of that nation of immigrants. And there's folks on this land who, you know, were colonized by immigrants. So the story is complex, and that's really hard to tell. And a lot of times reporters or journalists will just use those phrases like, we're a nation of immigrants. Or another thing that we see often is trying to stake the claim or the benefit of immigration as solely around economic benefit. You know, we should care about our immigrant friends and neighbors, not because, you know, they're valuable members of our community, but because they're economically valuable, and who is that value, you know, who is that value for? So those are things that, some tropes that we see pop up a lot that I wish weren't as common. But I would say that increased coverage, I mean, a lot of the incidents that we're seeing and talking about now have been happening for years. But we are starting to see more coverage, and it does help keep the issues alive for people, and hopefully trickling out to some of those people that might be able to contact their elected officials and really start to push on the issue.
I mean, two examples of issues to me that are undercovered in the mass media. One is a story that we're going to start looking into, and that is pointedly when you ask the mayor's office about whether police in Detroit cooperate with ICE agents, you cannot get a straight answer. And yet there's a lot of evidence that does happen. What does sanctuary city mean after all if there's not going to be at least that level of helping immigrants? And so why shouldn't the Free Press be like getting into this? You know, why shouldn't this be a top issue for them to cover? And the second example to me is the DACA story is the story on immigration. It involves 800,000 or so people. But why isn't the 12 million people who are undocumented the story on immigration? Why is there no discussion of a path to citizenship for 12 million people? The last time the Congress looked at it was 2007. It's over 10 years that anyone has discussed what do we do with 12 million people? Why isn't that the top story? Why isn't DACA a sub-story to a major story on what do we do with immigration in America? These things are talked about in our papers, but not in the mainstream papers, not in the mainstream conversation. And I wish we could influence that level of the talk.
This might be an impossible question to answer, but I've been struck recently about how much reporting is done on issues and people just don't read the stories or engage with the media. And I see, maybe everyone's seen this like on Facebook when there's like a meme about why is no one talking about X, and it's like, well, actually that's like everyone's talking about it in the media, but you're just not engaging. So I don't know about consumption of media, readership. How do you address that part of the equation when there are people working on so many stories, but if someone doesn't read it, then...
If I could start with that answer, and I'd like to hear what the others have to say. I mean, for us, that is about storytelling in general. And so there's lots of different avenues for storytelling. I think print and radio media is one form, but we do a lot of storytelling events in person. So, and we'll partner with either a church group and have a storytelling event with people telling their personal stories and what it's like. We've partnered with chambers of commerce, and so, or through music or different art forms. It's another way of getting some of that same information, but in a different format and in a way that it's more digestible for people. Some of the mainstream reporting, we need facts. I'm not dogging on facts here, but in terms of how to reach people and help them engage, sometimes when you give them a list of facts, they just tune out. But storytelling is a way that people can really make sense of an issue and understand the world around them. So we really uplift storytelling in lots of different forms.
And I would say that I agree that there is a lot of good reporting, long form reporting, things like, Vanity Fair and Forbes, and, they'll have long form reporting. Even Teen Vogue has become a space for younger audiences to really get a good bite. But like you're saying, there's more information available now than ever before, and it's all available in the same space. And how many times do you tag an article and say, I'm gonna come back and read it? And it gets buried under, So it's really information overload. The headline and the first paragraph or so, you get a sense of what's being reported on. And I agree with you, there is a lot. At the national level, in niche publications, and so a lot of it depends on what your Twitter feed and your Facebook or whatever you're on. Usually I'm not on Instagram or Snapchat. It depends on what your feed looks like. I'm surprised at how the same 15 or 20 folks are on my Twitter feed all the time, and that surprised me because I've liked way more people than that. So I don't know what what's the algorithm or whatever it is that's sending them that way. So then, therefore, I'm getting articles that are very strong, very in depth, but a lot of them. And maybe I'm a slow reader. I don't know. But that's an excellent point. Some of it is being written about.
One point I would add that relates to that is looking at the news landscape and how this country has lost thousands and thousands of local journalism jobs over the last decade. And so I don't think you could find anyone, not anyone, but you can't find many people today who can say, I know a journalist. So these people are not in the communities because these local papers have slashed their budgets, they've had layoffs, they sometimes don't even exist. So no one is getting news at a micro level anymore, which would have stopped, created some kind of filter, and also provided people with the opportunity to get to know the people who are reporting the news in their community. One other thing kind of related to it is that I think we as journalists don't do a really good job of explaining our process of reporting and what it takes to do what we do. I think the Washington Post has started to do that. They have something called Backstory, where they kind of talk about how they got the story or what went into it. And so because of this information overload, we don't know what goes into these stories, the months it takes, the money it takes, and so there's no stakes involved in seeing it as something that's valuable sometimes, I think.
I mean, it's from a publisher's point of view. I'm not a publisher, but I mean the others are. It's one of the major issues we face. I mean, how do you get people to read the paper? And we are in the middle of a Ford Foundation grant now to have an expert really figure out how to create digital engagement platforms, especially for young people, so that they might read the stories that are written. We met with Facebook. Facebook sent some people from their headquarters in New York a month and a half or so ago to discuss how Facebook treats news. It's just astounding this landscape and what you have to be aware of to be competitive in it. They know, for example, that if someone looks at a story for less than 7 seconds is the time. If it's less than 7 seconds, they're not going to read it. If once they press on it, it takes 2 seconds or more to load, they will not read it. They keep track of all of the data on a whole generation that is engaged with stories and with reading in a different way than previous generations, and especially for the ethnic and minority media. This is a very challenging space and world. These publications are doing fine in a general sense, both in their financial and readership numbers, but looking at it on a longer span, it's a serious worry of a generation that just doesn't care to read as much, or will take it in a certain format that is not long form usually, that is not text-based heavily, and so it's a challenge to tell the story well in this environment.
Like national news might not cover things that are important to the Michigan community at times, and then when we think of news deserts and media deserts, we don't have access to all of the papers or information that we used to. Also with the wide, diverse language barriers within the community of Michigan. Are you all open to citizen journalism programs and other non-traditional forms of media, such as podcasts? I know a lot of kids look at things on YouTube and things of that nature, but are those non-traditional forms of media of any interest to you all, especially with the community do-it-yourself kind of programs? I know Knoxx touched on having people in the community create some of those things, as well as Christine, but I just was interested in the panel's perspective on that. How can we create more citizen journalism programs? We have students here, things of that nature. How can they get involved with some of the publications that you work for and things of that nature?
Yeah, in terms of the publications that I represent here, we're open to. I mean, I actually offer my students the chance to write for the papers, and I think at a very basic level, hearing the voices of the community is a key part of understanding the community. And so the ethnic media might be more trusted. An Arab reporter might have better access and know where to access a story, but you still have to go and talk to people and still get them engaged in telling their story. The other side of it, them telling their own story and publishing it on their own, I think is possible today like never before with all the digital platforms that exist. Still though, I think there is a place where you reach a bigger audience with established organizations, and there are exceptions with things that go viral, but in general, you still need to create the existing organization and community connection in some real fashion, an honest way. so that voices are heard and filtered up through the system to a broader community. I mean, our collaboration with public radio, public television, and so on is especially for this reason, so that the stories that we cover in our own communities get told at a higher level, that get seen by more people, because, you know, so the Arab American news reaches 40,000 people, but, you know, WGET reaches a few 100,000 people, you know, and public television reaches more than that. We try to work with local ABC too, which reaches 1.2 million viewers, to have ways of telling our stories on that kind of a stage. So yes, I agree. I think we are, you know, I'm talking for myself, and we're open to all of those kinds of connections, knowing that the issue is having stories be told and be heard.
You know, journalism is a discipline and a craft. And so, like, when I can't watch the Today Show when Jenna Bush is on, because I'm like, girl, you know, I'm watching people go into debt and spend years trying to learn this craft, and you waltz in and sit down because you're, you know, George Bush's daughter. Like, just, oh, anybody can do this. You know, people don't walk into a surgery or operating room and say, you know, I've always wanted to be a surgeon. I can do this. You know, journalism has rules. It has structure. And I am getting, in my old age, I get the different forms a little bit better than I used to. Podcasts, I totally get them now. And I think the delivery formats I get. But I think you do have to have some training. And you need to, now, do you have to be a journalism major? No, I'm clear on that. Any intelligent person can be a good journalist. But, you know, the citizen journalism is something that's, it's very important right now. There's emphasis on it right now. It has saved the day, you know, because every one of us basically is a citizen journalist. Because if you see something happening, the first thing you're going to do is whip up your phone and get a shot of it. And if you're lucky, you might be able to sell it, you know, to a large media outlet and retire forever. So, you know, on a certain level, I get that we're all out here on assignment. But I'm also very cautious about the distinction between a trained journalist and, you know, a citizen. You know, Spike Lee said years ago, nobody else is my age, when he made his first couple of movies, a guy named Matty Rich made a movie that was huge, just like Spike Lee's. And so, of course, people wanted to pit, Matty Rich was a young black man, too. So people wanted to pit them against each other. And Spike Lee said, everybody has one good movie in them. Everybody can tell their own story once. He said, but I've been trained. I went to film school. I can do hundreds of these. I can recollect. I can do this on and on and on. And I don't think Matty Rich ever made another movie that I know of. So my point is, when you're trained in a discipline, you should be able to practice that craft different than someone, you know, who's not. I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I agree with everything Alicia said, but also I'm in favor of alternative forms of media because, you know, like newspapers can't handle all of that thing and all of those things, and sometimes narratives get lost and not told correctly. So while I am in favor of alternative forms of media and DIY media, I think that journalism is a craft, and if more people knew the kinds of things that went into it, I mean, the fact checking alone, that, you know, I have to, for one article, I have to interview, you know, if it's long enough, maybe 15, 20 people, and not every word they say gets put in. Then I have to go through and pose those, you know, interviews along with the actual article. So I'm talking like recordings, transcriptions, to an editor who then looks it over and then sends it to a fact checker who calls every single person and verifies that they told me what I'm quoting them as. And so there's a whole process to it. It's extensive. Because budgets have been cut, some of that stuff has gone away. But if we're talking, you know, the craft of journalism, there's a lot that goes into it that people don't understand. I think one solution to that, the reason why alternative forms of media or citizen journalism has grown is because people felt like their stories weren't being told and they weren't being told correctly. So I'll go back to my point about diversity in the newsroom, that if you have people in those newsrooms who are from those communities, who can establish that basic trust between them as a representative of a mainstream media outlet and the communities they're covering, I think a lot of that could be minimized.
I would say it's a both and. I think we need, the structured, rigorous storytelling with fact checking. I appreciate the fact checking because immigration is very complex, and we've had a lot of stories print where there's a lot of errors about immigration policy, and we don't want that happening, so I appreciate that. But at the same time, again, we especially think about reaching new audiences and folks that aren't engaged with traditional media. So citizen journalism or variations on that theme can be really helpful. So I'm thinking of, like for us, we've really enjoyed volunteers who make videos, and we had a Wayne State student actually who made a series of videos, and she went and interviewed refugees in the community and told their stories, did a wonderful job. That was incredibly helpful for us to help get those stories out there. And then I also think about just citizen engagement, even with traditional media, but in a different way. So like submitting letters to the editor or doing an op-ed. And I'm thinking of not just, the big mainstream outlets, but smaller papers. Like we had an incident in Alma where there was a very anti-immigrant speaker coming to town, and we worked with a group of citizens to kind of band together. They did a really wonderful letter to the editor, and they got the local press to turn out for the event and cover it they had a sort of counterpoint to the speaker that was covered well, and so that we really appreciated. So it's a different way of engaging, and it's with a smaller paper.
And I would add that in another way, collaboration. To me, one of the solutions is collaborations. That is, for example, in New Jersey, they created what's called voting block. This was coming up to the governor's race in New Jersey. There were 20 or so news organizations, some very small community organizations, banded together to do sort of a different kind of coverage of the race for the governor. And they went neighborhood to neighborhood, found people, brought them around tables or restaurants to talk about their experience with the race, and covered it from multiple different angles, with multiple different organizations, each with its own tradition of doing news and with its own audience. And the end result of it was a much more multifaceted, much more authentic sort of telling of many different kinds of narratives than would have been possible with just one newspaper doing one coverage of the lead up to the governor's race. New Michigan Media is in the same idea in some sense, that is we work together to cover better. But I'll tell you that this too, minority communities often live in their own silos. Just because people are minorities doesn't mean they know one another. Arabs don't know Latinos, Latinos don't know African Americans, they don't know the Asians. I mean, each group is its own sort of silo, and collaborating in our case with the ethnic papers, publishing articles in all the different papers. So you would have an Arabic story in the Latino paper, for example, on purpose. I mean, it is a way of creating common understanding of issues that they all share and are addressing. Because after all, why shouldn't Arabs and Latinos unite on immigration? Okay, they're both facing the same problem, except that they're not united at all. On community level, I mean, at the level of the large communities. And so collaborations, I think, both tell better stories, but also create more political strength and power and agency.
You can have that outrage I'm looking for.
There you go.
Yeah.
Actually, is to the points of tweeting. Right. Sorry, it's a millennial colloquialism.
It's
I don't
okay.
know if you, never mind, it was going Anyways, so in terms of, you pointed out collaboration and your note on journalism and your note on bringing diversity into the newsroom. Me being a millennial, in terms of the narrative, a certain narrative reaching, the largest, most possible audience, me just thinking simply, you go up the chain to, you collaborate with an organization or a platform that reaches more people, local radio stations, local TV stations, those are great. And they're more than likely going to get the narrative that you have originally across, but it'll only reach so many people. But I feel as though as you go up the chain to try to reach more people, the more likely that narrative is to be changed. So I guess my question is, if any, is there a way to overcome the obstacles? Because also as you go up the chain, with some of the biggest platforms that just about, on average everyone watches, I think of CBS, Fox News, how terrible they are, just a few. There isn't too much diversity in those newsrooms, not on a widespread, daily basis, and I just wonder, if it's possible to overcome those obstacles, to get original narrative across to the most people, if that makes any sense.
Again, I go back to, you have to support the people who are trying. There are people, this is, in the old movies where the superhero or whatever, whoever is the hero. So one bad guy comes up and he knocks the one, then the next bad guy. I was saying, why don't all the bad guys jump the superhero at one time, and then how good he really is. So it's really, you are isolated in these situations, and I think your example was perfect. Imagine being decades younger and the only person, and sometimes that's not a bad thing, but I can see how in a department at the New York Times that would, end up, you feel very isolated. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is that it's not just my opinion that Black people want to hear this, or people in my age group want to hear that, or folks who went to Michigan State are tired of this, It's not just my opinion, it is the universally accepted opinion. So if more people contact these newsrooms, they have reinforcement for their opinion. Mm-hmm. They turn to the person next to them who looks just like them, and that's their reinforcement. So you have got to contact these media outlets, and that's the only, there are some organizations that are of assistance. I'm on the board of the Detroit chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists. There's a Hispanic Journalists Association, Native American and Asian American. So those are major journalism organizations. The National Association of Black Journalists will bring their national convention here to Detroit this summer, which is huge. That'll be about 4,000 journalists of all types, color, and everything, and newsmakers and media decision makers. They're going to see the city this summer, and hopefully, these narratives that some of them have never been to this city, so they for some they'll see change and different. For some, they've never been here before. It's the reinforcement of I'm trying to bring a new idea that is needed, and that comes from the community as much as not. It comes from colleagues, comes from advocacy organizations, but it's got to come from somewhere, because one person sitting in the newsroom, I don't disagree with you, we need diversity in the newsroom, but when you're the only diverse sitting there, it's not good.
I heard a question in there too about like the national press and what happens when a story goes up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We don't work with national press as much, partially because we're trying to reach folks who might not be reached by those outlets, but I also find them just incredibly reductionist. So, when you're trying to tell a local story, they'll come to try and cover a story about Yemenis and Yemeni people living in Dearborn, and then they post a picture with it from, the Yemeni mural in Hamtramck. And it just, for us, it's not, sometimes it doesn't always help the cause, and they often just kind of reduce the story to the bare minimum of what they think will work at a national scale. So there may be points where that's helpful, but for us, we don't invest a lot of time into it.
Yeah, I mean, moving it up the chain is a serious challenge because the news hole is limited, and if they don't value the story, it's hard to get it up into that spot. You know, a few years ago, Knight Foundation came and said, look, we're going to put a pot of money in this, and we want to create a way for all of you ethnic and nonprofit news organizations to collaborate and do the stories together. So that was as Detroit was sliding into bankruptcy, and the idea was, how do we tell the story of the bankruptcy in a maybe non-traditional way? This is the Detroit Journalism Cooperative, the DJC. It's been going on for now 3 years. And at its best, it created the kind of collaboration that we never saw before. For example, you know, we had stories where the Michigan Chronicle would do a story, which is the African American paper in Detroit, would do a story on a black family facing issues as services were being cut in neighborhoods about transportation and lighting and safety. And so they would send a reporter to cover the story, and Michigan Radio, which has no idea about Detroit really, would send their reporter along. And so the Michigan Chronicle reporter would do the interview, has the legitimacy to talk to an African American family, understanding the city, understanding the people's lives. And the Michigan Radio reporter would be there doing the voice recording of it with some video shots as well. They would put the story on Michigan Radio that night with a video shot on their website, and the Michigan Chronicle would do the story in the newspaper. So this is the way a story about a family in Detroit got up to the level of Michigan Radio, which is statewide radio, which would never have happened had the collaboration not been in place. It wouldn't ever have happened if the foundation hadn't put money into it in the first place, though. Okay, so it wasn't in sort of their interest to suggest that let's do this together. It's because money came in and we tried, we found a way to collaborate. It's hard though otherwise to get these stories up in that system.
I would just comment, as a freelancer, trying to place stories about Detroit in the national press is very difficult. Either because they say, why should we care? Or they try to control what they think is happening here. That was something that I very quickly found out when I got here and I started pitching stories. I can give you a very small example. I had a piece about a local business in a particular community where I sent photos along with the story to be included, and they didn't include the photos, but then proceeded to include photos about a business story with a business story, photos of abandoned houses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Or you always see this headline, can blah blah save Detroit? Detroit is a very big place. I think there was one I saw on Twitter the other day, like, can arugula save Detroit? Kind of these narratives that, even though they say that, after the election happened, there was all this talk about, we don't know America, and this is flyover country, and we have failed because of the West Coast elite journalism or whatever. But it's been hard being here to communicate that to editors who live in New York City. So.
What city did you come? Were you living
Los
in?
Angeles.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions? Concerns? Comments? Any last words, last remarks from our panel?
Be a media advocate, that's fine. Stay involved, You'd be like, what's the 13th man or on the bench, because the audience, getting blowback from the audience is one of the few things that will have an effect on media coverage.
Yeah, to me, media is a powerful tool. It's a political weapon, but it has to be used. People have to fight to get their voices heard, fight to get their stories told, understanding all along that if you're a minority, you are facing an uneven political battle in having that voice heard. And so as long as you understand that these are the rules that someone else has written, but these are the rules you have to fight against, I think if people work together, I think there's a chance to make it.
I would say stay involved in storytelling in whatever way you gravitate towards. So whether it's, you know, sharing a well fact-checked article with people you know who might read it, and, you know, having a conversation about it to keep the issues alive, or it could be, you know, there's a lot of grassroots groups that do sort of DIY media training. Ad Media Conference is always here in Detroit. That's a great source. But there's other local grassroots groups that can train people how to tell their own story, how to make videos, and sharing that with people you know, and you know, writing those letters to the editor. Any kind of form of media activism, I think we need it all in this moment.
All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Don't run out of here. We have the room for just a few more minutes. We have some water and we have snacks in the back. And then if you all had like questions or comments that you were maybe a little afraid to ask in front of everyone, the panelists will be hanging out for a few more minutes. So thank you.